evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Sarrazin. I'm a senior research fellow here at Reuben College, where I direct the Global Challenges program. We are an interdisciplinary incubator of ideas and practical action for some of the world's most pressing problems. Tonight's panel, as you know, is co-hosted with Codex. And so I think Rakesh is going to say a few words and then pass it back to me. So thank you.
I know many of you have traveled quite considerable distances to be here. So welcome to all near and far who've traveled from near and far. As I stand here, literally almost to the month, it's, believe it or not, 20 years since I did the first Codex event. And I've got the white hair to prove it. And as you can imagine, we've seen a lot of technological progress over those 20 years. For example, we've been honored to host NASA's senior leaders. We've had the chief technologist of NASA, the chief scientist of NASA, the head of science of NASA even, come and talk to Codex and the group about why it's important to get back onto the moon and why the moon is going to be used as a staging post for further space exploration. We've had the Nobel Prize winner, John Mather, Nobel Prize winner 2006. This is the chap who actually designed and launched the James Webb Space Telescope. Come and talk to the group about why this space telescope is so important and all the amazing images that it's giving us from the early universe and what we can learn about the beginnings of the universe. We've had amazing policymakers. We've had one of the great chancellors of the Exchequer of this country, Ken Clarke, come and talk to us. And he came to speak to us about how governments and policymakers can create the right business weather and right atmosphere so that companies and innovators can prosper. My God, you know, back in the day, chancellors of the Exchequer knew a thing or two about economics and business. And we had Ken Clarke scheduled for a half-an-hour Q&A with the audience. 90 minutes later, he was still there. And nobody could care less because it was so interesting and so exciting learning from his experience. He enjoyed it so much, he came back again the following year. And as you can imagine, we've had many, many leaders in AI speak on the platform over the years. The standouts are Nima Nandkumar at NVIDIA, one of the great AI researchers in the world, and Dave Palmer, who's one of the co-founders of Darktrace, one of the doyens of the British AI and cybersecurity business. But I have to point out one major highlight, and that is when one of our curators invited a Dr. Uge Sahin, CEO of BioNTech, to the World's Top 50 Innovators 2019 at the Royal Society. And remember, this event was taking place in September 2019. September 2019. And he was invited because he was the world leader in individualized cancer immunotherapy using an mRNA vaccine. And there's a fantastic talk about how this mRNA vaccine can hit your individual cancer, hit the bad cells, but leave the healthy ones alone. Obviously, a lot of medical people, a lot of bioscience people in the audience. So somebody just put their hand up, and you can see this on the video on the Codex website. Somebody put their hand up and said, what if there's an epidemic or a pandemic? And cool as a cucumber, Uge Sahin said, well, that's quite simple, really. You just tweak the mRNA vaccine to hit the pathogen causing the problem. Literally 4 months later, that's exactly what he did in partnership with Pfizer to produce the world's first mRNA coronavirus vaccine. And incredibly, in his team was a lady called Katalin Kariko. That's whose technology they licensed. And she, of course, went on to win the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2023. So there have been many, many highlights, and they're just a few. Now, on to tonight's event. As you can see, in true Codex style, we've got a fantastic panel of speakers, all of whom are at the top of their game in their respective fields. So I'm going to hand you over to our host, who's Andrew Sarrazin, a very bright chap, senior research fellow at Reuben College, Oxford. Okay. So over to you, Andrew. And just before he starts, I just want to remind you that all of the speakers have got very distinguished backgrounds, very distinguished biographies. All the biographies are online at codex.com. If you click on the event, click on the speaker's picture, you can read the amazing things that they've achieved and the amazing things that they've done. Over to you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you. So, and welcome on behalf of the president of Reuben College, Professor Lord Lionel Tarasenko. Reuben College is a startup within an 800-year-old institution. It was founded in 2019. I'm glad to see some of my colleagues, fellows here tonight, and other members of the college joining us. We also have members of the audience that are our Generation AI advisory group, including Sarah Ratner, Zelda Yanovich, Bella Blake, Gabby Peverini, Kayla Livingston-Banks, and Peter Slovak are all here. There's so much expertise in the audience tonight. We have a number of teachers I know in the audience. Many others who work with young people, which I think we're very excited to get to your questions later in the event. I've spent my career creating new technologies, first as a trained researcher in infectious disease here at Oxford, and I later went on to the Gates Foundation to lead their unconventional ideas to develop new vaccines, medicines, and diagnostics. I founded, in the meantime, 2 biotech companies in agriculture and was most recently president of one of the Templeton philanthropies. But my most impressive title is that I'm a dad of 3 boys, the oldest of whom is here tonight, Henry, who's 11. And he supports Liverpool, apparently. So tonight we're going to be talking about kids and technology, what is happening and is right now and what is to come with advances in artificial intelligence. And I have a confession to make, which is that I have no clue what to do. Personally, at home, we've tried everything. We've tried video games as a reward. We've tried parental controls and screen time allocations. We've tried cold turkey removals of devices and everything in between. And what it feels like is a 3-way arms race between both the ferocity and the intelligence of young people, the sheer resources of technology, companies, and the government, and on the losing end is dear old mom and dad. This is a discussion that happens in every family, in every country. And over the past year at Generation AI, we've hosted dozens of scholars and top experts, many of whom are in the room tonight, in AI, mental health, and child development to sort this out. And most of these convenings are professors. And so there's lots of disagreement about what we should do. Does anybody actually know the name for the collective assembly of professors? So you have like a murder of crows, a parliament of owls, and so forth. Does anybody know this? Peter, do you know? No? It's a waffle of professors. And so, but however, in this sort of journey that we've been on, the one thing we've agreed upon is how crazy the AI boom has become since 2022. Hundreds of foundation models being publicly released and increasingly showing their power. But today's generative AI platforms are explicitly not for children, which is a huge issue because over 50% of UK school children routinely use Gen AI for their homework. And so it is that young people will grow and learn and develop in a world where AI agents may be as convincing and powerful as and certainly as prevalent as human beings. For children, digital technologies are already embedded in daily life. Shocking statistics, I suppose, from Ofcom stating that 1/4 of 5 to 7-year-olds own a smartphone and 1/3 reports using social media independently. That's 5 to 7-year-olds. Nearly all adolescents in the United States have at least one mobile device, and 90% own a smartphone. So parents and other caregivers face a potentially vexing dilemma in evaluating digital technologies. Limitations of use are perceived as limiting to children, adolescents, and are counterproductive. And of course, each child is different. For some children, social media use is liberating and inspiring, and for others, it is a pathway to destructive social comparison and anxiety. So the questions we're here tonight to talk about include, should we follow the example of Ned Ludd, the legendary weaver who broke the machines in Nottingham, how we get Luddite, or the more recent phone-free childhood campaigners ignited by Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation, or should we fully embrace the accelerationistas, the technological optimists whose mantra seems to be to save the world, click here. So the key challenge in the coming years in our virtual and physical environments, they may be AI rich, but the question is, will they or how will they enrich our lives? How to spot the difference between effective technology use and potentially dangerous technology use. What role for private citizens and governments to take action? And this is the panel we have here to help us lead through the discussion to answer some of these questions and more tonight. As Rakesh said, their bios are on the website, and so if you want to learn more about them, you can. I will start at the far end with Joana Lenkova, who is a Futurology director at Lego Group, and in this role, she helps define and anticipate industry and consumer trends for Lego using strategic insight. She's worked with other brands such as Walt Disney, AB InBev, and Societe Generale. Joanna is also an alumna of Said Business School, and welcome back to Oxford. We also have Ayca Atabey, who's a lawyer and researcher at University of Edinburgh's Centre for Data, Culture, and Society at the Edinburgh's Future Institute. She's also been a research assistant at the Five Rights Foundation, and also a consultant on data protection, human rights, and migration at the UN. We have Alan Greenberg in the middle, who has had an extensive career as an entrepreneur, an investor to build, nurture, and scale digital engagement, primarily in EdTech, health tech, and conversational AI. He was a pioneer in the education technology space while director at Apple, creating and launching iTunes U and education podcasting while he was there. We have a local person here, Kayla Blomquist from the Oxford Internet Institute, where she's a researcher and director of the Oxford China Policy Lab. And prior to coming to Oxford 4 years ago, she served as a diplomat in the US mission to China for 4 years, specializing in governance and emerging and dual-use technologies. And last but not least, we have Antonia Curl, who is the chief technical advisor from the BBC, leading a team that gives independent strategic advice on how technology will shape BBC's future. And in this work, she covers topics like disinformation, public trust in media, in institutions, hate speech, and of course, artificial intelligence. Antonia spent her career in consulting as well, starting at Deloitte and later at The Economist. So we have a great panel here today. I'm going to start out, I'm going to try and manage this in kind of 5 different phases. We'll see how far we get. We're going to start with a general question and then move to some specific questions for the panel. And then we're going to potentially do a lightning round where I'm going to ask for some very short answers before we get to your questions. So I'm going to start with a general question here. Which is just sort of how you use generative AI today in your own work. How do you engage with these tools? What do you look for? And where do they help you most? I'm admittedly, as Henry will tell you, a slow adopter of these kind of things. So who would like to go first and sort of just how do you use Gen AI tools today? Alan, yeah.
ChatGPT. There's on 4.5, you've got the deep learning capability. I've managed to develop theses and documents. The longest one was about 52 pages in less than 14 minutes on a journey from Peckham Rye Station to Victoria Station. I then had to read it, which was a bit of a challenge, having generated 52 pages off the back of 3 questions, and found out it's really smart. So I think that one of the major disruptions we're looking at the moment are the management consultancies. I think they've just become obsolete. If you can ask the right question and you can interpret the right answer, I think you have a huge opportunity to leverage the resources of the world. Perplexity is my go-to environment because Perplexity has a structure and a simplicity to it that I like a lot. I'm going to start irritating a few people by saying I hate Google. Google is an advertising company, so when something like Perplexity comes along and ChatGPT and Claude, we've moved into a completely different era. Yeah. I welcome it and I use it every day.
Great, thanks. Antonia, do you want to?
We were literally having this conversation today around what tools we want to use, and there's always this tension if you're at a big company, big organization like the BBC, between what you want to use and what you're allowed to use, right? So we have a laundry list. One of them is also sort of deep research, because after going through some of the anxiety of potentially losing our jobs because we write a bunch of reports. We basically do what deep research does. We thought, okay, let's see how we can use this and actually sort of try and get ahead of the curve, and rather than following the Ned Ludd path, see if we can kind of harness it to do what we do better.
As a researcher, Kayla, do you use the Gen AI tools?
Definitely, but I think it's still, as you said, a bit of a gray area. It's not so accepted in specific versions of research, but I do think Elicit is a really great platform for finding more sources, doing literature reviews. But in a different lane, I really like to try and find ways to have it help me do the things I actually enjoy doing. So in meetings, of course, with the consent of everyone involved, I like to sometimes record it, especially if it's online, and then feed that into Claude and have it produce like really comprehensive notes for me, and then go back through. Having just been very present in that conversation, can very easily pick out the accuracy.
To move between note taking and
and so I just have more fun in my conversations that way.
Yeah, Joana or Ayca, do you want to tell us how you use tools?
I guess, right now, mostly the use is in terms of making things efficient and crunching a lot of data. But I do use it as well for my foresight work.
Okay.
Just really much easier to have a wide range of information and do horizon scanning, which is the basis for then human interpretation and picking up signals. But what I think is really interesting, and it came out from a conversation that I had with a colleague of mine where maybe a year ago, where we were talking about the impact on creativity and how, AI is not really used for enhancing creativity. And he said, well, why? Why do you think that way? He's actually using it to help him learn how to paint better. Mm-hmm. So he challenged me with that, and I'm trying to find ways in learning how to be more creative with AI and pushing the boundaries.
Ayca,
Thank you. Actually, that's really interesting, and I changed my answer just now. It inspired me. In terms of, myself, I don't use it for creativity for, I think, classic reasons, summarizing documents, blah, blah, blah. But I think what's more interesting about, linking back to that creativity is, as a researcher working with children, we used it in actually creative workshops, and especially with children with disabilities, nonverbal children, the excitement they have when using Gen AI, especially in the context of art-based and imagining future. So that was, I think, that is the most interesting and exciting part that, thanks to your answer, I remember just now.
There's a really good Harvard Business Review article called The Jagged Frontier, which describes for knowledge workers in a fairly large study productivity changes with using generative AI tools, and idea generation is clearly one of those that actually you gain so much efficiency. If you're like trying to come up with different brand concepts, and both the quantity and the quality of those ideas in that paper showed. So, Joana, I'm going to stay with you. Sure. As LEGO Futurology director, what trends what are you watching? What are you seeing there? And what are you paying attention to?
I love this question. I have two things to say about that. Usually when we talk about trends and we talk about AI, we're very, very focused on, what technologies are coming up and what new innovation is happening within technology. As a futurist, I always look at all of the adjacent from the pestle or steep category, and I think this is really important because you really need to get down to the needs and the societal shifts that are happening, that are provoking certain technology to grow, and what sort of how the technology is going to address these needs in the future. So it's important to look at it from that perspective. Of course, social changes, legislation as well, where we try to obviously monitor everything that's happening in that sector, but also be part of the conversation. And actually, thank you for inviting us as a company to be part of this panel. And then the second part of this is, again, from a futurist perspective, I don't have a technology background. So these people here are probably much better suited to answer technology questions. But from a foresight perspective, you don't only look at trends to react to the trends. As a good futurist, you try to project a future that you want to live in. And I'm really happy that, with the Lego group, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to really focus on the needs of children and actually hear their voices. So that's one source of trends that we're looking at, and one source of truth and information that can help us build safe environments with AI in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely one thing I want to sort of come back to over and over, which is the involvement of children in the creation of new technologies, given the power of that kind of approach. I mean, do you see, for example, like play? Of course, Lego is synonymous with sort of play-based learning and things like that. And I mean, do you see play changing as a kind of human habit or a behavior?
Play is a fundamental, need and response to a need. But of course, AI is going to change things. And as we evolve, we embrace the innovation. On one hand, of course, AI has this huge impact. Of course, we should look at it in a wholesome way. Childhood is still going to continue to be childhood. It will be impacted by AI, but also by the search for harmonious living with physical play as well. But I think it's really important to consider what sort of hopes children have for the future and how they perceive AI and listen to their voices, because they know a lot about technology, sometimes a lot more than we do. And in that sense, there are a few interesting things that we're doing in collaboration and in different partnerships. We sponsored the first AI Children's Summit earlier in the year, and we're also collaborating with the Turing Institute at the moment. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to have some really interesting results where we're engaging children to tell us about the impact on their well-being. So we believe that having this information and these insights are going to be really pivotal for anybody who is building AI. And yeah, hopefully we'll get that soon. It's going to be published.
So, maybe turn to Alan here. You've been at the forefront of technology adoption in the education sphere for many years. What excites you about AI, generative AI tools today, and what principles do you think, through that experience you've had, that companies can use to prioritize what principles of action when developing AI systems?
How long have I got? 2 hours? 3 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. Simple principles. AI is a term, and there are multiple companies. But I believe what we're moving into has been defined as service as a software, where you have built for purpose, AI capability, so it has a mission, and that mission can be applied, in my opinion, to almost all generations, and particularly also, since we're mentioning special needs, is particularly applicable in special needs. So built for purpose is the first component of it, so have a defined mission. Second principle is one of authenticity, and by authenticity I mean the authenticity of the content. In other words, not searching the whole of the web, but searching relevant papers, research, information, textbooks, information that can be authenticated and approved by, let's say, the domain experts in their area. And I'm not a domain, not me as a domain expert, but domain experts who can define this is the right thing. So, for example, if you take autism and the work of Professor Simon Baron-Cohen, for example, that would be authentic content that's suitable for autistic children. And then the third piece of the equation is what I refer to as a trust coefficient. And a trust coefficient is really one of the most hardest things to define. But ultimately, we need to trust the technologies we're using, and we need to trust the content that's being sourced, and we need to be able to trust the application of it, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's directive research or in any other area. But I'm an optimist, and I believe those are the principles that will lead into the coming and the existing generation of built-for-purpose AI capability. There is one thing I'd like to add, which I think to any of the teachers and academics in this audience, is that there's one missing link in society. And the missing link in society, or the missing link in education, is one of critical thinking, which in my opinion is the ability to ask the right question. If you can't ask the right question, then what we're discussing is nascent. It just doesn't function. But critical thought is equally important, is the ability to interpret the answer coming back to you. Can I give a brief example? I'm probably the oldest person in the room, but when I went to school, I learned arithmetic. I learned to add, subtract, multiply, divide. I wasn't great, but I was competent. When I left school and I went to work, started to work in retail, I was given a calculator. And a calculator made me 10 times faster. But did I trust the calculator? No. I was doing the mental arithmetic in my mind to make sure that the numbers on my calculator were correct. So I just multiplied my capability. I think that paradigm shift is where we are today. It's not a substitute for education. It's not a substitute for knowledge. You still have to have a blended approach where you're being taught, where you're learning things, but you have the ability to sense check and then maybe escalate your learning. Yeah. So I believe in that particular philosophy.
No, I love that. Like, well, even thinking about something like writing, where you can focus on the product, the end product, the essay or whatever it is, but there's a different way of approaching writing, which is thinking. Writing is thinking, writing is learning, and it's about the process of doing it, which is as valuable as the end product.
But then you're challenged with the fact there are people in the room who will say that assessment is critical. I think assessment is broken. I think we need new methodologies of assessment that lean into the new environments that we're moving into. I'm
sure we'll get some questions about that in debate in a second. Ayca, thinking about, I'm thinking about guardrails now. So Alan talked about kind of key principles of engagement and possibilities for, efficiency gains. You're a lawyer and a researcher in digital rights. So what are you seeing broadly about children's engagement with AI and how guardrails are being put into place?
Yeah, thank you. That's great and big question.
Easy one, right?
Very easy one.
Well, so we have, we'd like to throw innovation here, and but also in a balanced way, and so
definitely, yeah. Since you just actually mentioned that pro-innovation as well, so whatever guardrails we are and we will be talking about, it needs to be child rights based, and that doesn't that actually covers both protection, participation, encouragement. So basically both addressing the risks and negatives, but also really recognizing that actually there are opportunities as well. So this holistic and rights-based approach is what is required in the UN Committee on Rights of the Child's General Comment 25. I will refer to the international legal instrument here. So basically this is about how child rights apply in the digital world. And when we look at there, it is usually when we talk about rights, regulation, laws, we think about mostly safety, mostly protecting children, but actually it's not only that. It's about also encouraging innovation in a way, and how that can enable children, encourage children to participate in the digital world. So my answer, if I can wrap it up, it would be really doing everything that we can do when we think about guardrails and from a child rights-based approach, and that includes privacy, safety, education, play, and all of these together, and how actually whatever AI is in use impacts these rights. So an impact assessment, I would say, an evaluation of child rights impact assessment and how this impacts specific groups of children and different groups of children is really important. And I think the most important one is that when we talk about AI, children's AI use, we make decisions for children, so which shouldn't be the case. So making AI world good for children should be with children. And I think this is something that is hugely missing currently in the discussions and in the real world as well. Yeah.
One particular framework that I know you working with the Five Rights Foundation that I also contributed to is the Children in AI Design Code, and so if others are interested in following up on that specifically and reading about that, do you want to sort of mention,
yes, of course,
for that for a second?
Is really important.
Because I think it's a tangible example of sort of implementing
what
some of these
looks like.
Yeah,
definitely. So AI, that code, and also age-appropriate design code in the UK as well. So I think it is important to mention that as well. It's the first code in the world, law in the world, that actually, in the context of data protection and privacy, referred explicitly to child rights. And after it was enforced in the UK, now we see it in different parts of the world, which is really amazing. And coming back to the AI code, it is really tangible, it is really practical, and it is what good looks like for children, with children in the AI world, and it recognizes child rights as well. And I think one of the most exciting things in the code is that really it speaks to different stakeholders. It recognizes the fact that the design of the AI world must be with children, respecting children's rights, but also taking into account technical aspect, the design aspect, rights aspect, so multi-stakeholder and interdisciplinary approaches. So that is really key, and it is what good looks like. So if you're interested, please go to the Five Rights website and look at that amazing work. And I saw it yesterday actually on LinkedIn that I think Bibin Kidrin, the founder of Five Rights Foundation, she referred to it as a Ferrari of the AI in the higher world of code, and which is I think true.
Yes, it has all the features. Yeah, so I'm going to turn then to Antonia though. When thinking about kind of media consumption more generally at the BBC, you have a role, in public service and public media. I guess sort of two-part question. The first is do you think about what skills or capacities in the audience that you're trying to reach are important, and how they change, in interacting with new AI systems, and mostly a question about what is an audience, what kind of audience response are you most looking at this point?
So first of all, I think, and this isn't a great secret, right? We as an organization and like many legacy media companies and probably even Facebook, frankly, have a challenge in being able to engage young people. And if we look at our sort of charts that show the kind of audience engagement with our content across the different age ranges, for young people, it's really basically at the bottom. And right now, I think the macro challenge that we face is access, because there's so much information out there. We're in this constant war for engagement with everybody, right? Not just young people, but also all our audiences. So how do we reach them, and how do we reach them with the content that they want, and that is sort of trusted and informative? And that is a very big question that we have. So right now, for example, if you have a smart TV at home, actually YouTube is the most popular app on a smart TV more than anything else, right? And so what does that mean for us? Doesn't look great. We have Bite Size, and there's a sort of education offering that the BBC has. And Tim Davie actually gave a speech today where he was sort of outlining some of the commitments that the BBC is exploring going forward. And one of them is around sort of Bite Size and AI literacy and an AI campaign there. But I just want to kind of even double click into what that means. So there is this piece of it, right, that is just how could we help kids learn how to code, and how can we give those tools to teachers to sort of do some of the more practical technical elements. But on this critical thinking point, that to me is as important, possibly infinitely more important than the actual ability to sort of build this technology yourself. So for example, we want a country where we are raising citizens who can ask questions about public funding. Should we be spending all this money on autonomous vehicles, or should we be putting it into public transport, right? Or we're talking about the trust coefficient. There's some really interesting work that's going on in various different local councils around kind of direct participation. And so how can we use technologies to enable that more than we currently do. So I think for me, that critical thinking piece is so crucial, and also sort of being able to help young people, and indeed all our audiences, understand, what are some of the trends around mis and disinformation in the media ecosystem. So you might think that you just see an image of the Pope in the puffer jacket, and everyone assumes that is in fact a real thing that has happened, when actually disinformation, you have sort of whole bot armies that elevate particular pieces of information that are trending online. And so if you're a young person, or indeed anyone, how can you assess whether or not a particular piece of content is true, but even the discourse around that content, is it, is that something that I'm seeing because of my political affiliation or ethnicity or whatever it might be? So I guess that's a lot to say that there is, we see that, and we think it's absolutely critical part of sort of any education that we might be doing around AI, that we have citizens who are able to make informed choices.
Yeah, I mean, so Reuben College, most of it, where you came in, was the Radcliffe Science Library, and when I was a student, I would go in and read a chemistry journal or whatever, and I've never thought to myself, what were the motivations of the incentives of the person that was writing this article? Maybe I should have thought that, but like that's such a critical, it's the kind of meta-knowledge around any piece of information that is such an important, and such an important skill to have today. Kayla, I'm going to turn to you. You've been very patient, so, but your expertise is super interesting in this conversation where, there's a lot of fear, a lot of kind of concern, especially about state actors and China. What in your opinion and what you've seen, having lived there and worked there professionally, is there a different approach towards artificial intelligence in China and how it's being deployed and developed, and maybe dispel maybe some myths that those of us who are less kind of familiar with the dialogue in that country about the approach to artificial intelligence. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think actually the audience in this room might be a bit more pre-bunked for the myths that I see in Western policy spaces. In a lot of the spaces that I work in UK, US, foreign policy, national security spaces, there is this perception that China, as one unitary actor, which it very much is not, is racing against the US towards this kind of mythical conception of AGI or artificial superintelligence. And a lot of the consequential policy discourse focuses on that, when actually, in practice, a lot of the approaches that we see both by Chinese government, broader Chinese AI development ecosystem, and then society more broadly, is very diffusion-oriented. And basically adopting into society, especially education, as one of those key areas. And you were talking about incentives around the narratives that we see in media. I think that's an interesting thing in many layers here of people using either China and its supposed actions and motives around AI, although there are so many across, the 1.4 plus billion people, plus the government as its own entity with many different parts of the bureaucracy itself, not to mention many private sector actors. But also, in the West, I think a lot of the public discourse tends to get stuck on, you can either have innovation or you can have regulation. And actually, in China, we're seeing a lot of both, especially around the protection of children. And so
I'd love to have you elaborate on that specifically. Because one of my questions was about this tension between, or perceived tension between regulation and innovation, and of course J.D. Vance going to the European Union Commission to say, to scold them that Europe has more AI regulations than they do have significant AI companies. So please, if you were there, what would you say in this sort of regulation innovation debate?
Well, I think that we are in such a period of uncertainty as a global society, as just different nations, and we don't actually know the eventual trajectory of this broad set of technologies, and we have a lot of social questions to work through together as different communities and as a global community. So in some ways, some regulations might be a bit premature, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be having really active conversations between government entities, between the developers of these technologies and civil society. So I'm not suggesting that is happening, perfectly in the Chinese ecosystem. However, there are some elements of being forward-leaning in trying to build out protections for vulnerable populations, specifically children and elderly, although there are some big gaps there on who is and is not protected. And then forward-leaning in terms of adopting some of the currently deployable models and their applications into schools. So it's not always one or the other. And I think I would.
How did they integrate the protections for children specifically?
So far, so it's early days. So far, it actually has been language woven into a number of the kind of application-specific AI regulations, and so broad language of needing to protect these groups of people. But that will then give the kind of remit for different actors to go and add specificity later. And it's going to be a learning process for everybody, and I wouldn't say that they have all of these things figured out yet.
Can I add
yeah,
something
please.
to
Let's.
that? Sorry.
I think we now are in the part of the discussion where please jump in. And,
It's super interesting because I also think there is a question around, when we think about innovation, we assume it's just innovation from big tech and that the big tech model of innovation is the only way we can innovate. And that isn't true, right? So if you're thinking about social media, which is sort of functionally an advertising platform, what if there were to be other kinds of social media that weren't sort of founded on the basis of just driving ad revenue, but it was actually about sort of, fruitful public discourse or whatever it might be. So I think that's also the thing too, right? We may need to regulate in order to create that level playing field. But equally, we could imagine new types of innovation that are actually just primarily beneficial to society rather than to shareholders.
Alan, you're nodding your head, and I chose.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge subject, but I think that, I'm both naive and stupid at the same time, but I think there are bad actors and I think there are good actors, and I think that giving them names of countries or regions of the world is very, very dangerous indeed. Having lived in China and had amazing experience in China, I know for a fact that the Chinese government wants the best for their people. Now, I'm sure the UK government and the American government could say the same, but the Chinese government does things about it. They may do things a way that we don't like. I'll give you an example. In a traditional classroom of 30 kids, you can have 20 kids who are average, 5 are below average, 5 are above average. In the UK system, we tend to look at finding those 5 kids who are below average and bring them up to average. But there's another problem, is the 5 who are above average are being dragged back to average. That's not good, except in China, where those 5 kids will be identified and taken off and put in another school to become members of the government. Now, you could argue that's a bad thing. I would argue, actually, that's using their resources in a positive way. So you've got to look at it holistically, and you've got to look at it with an open mind. I don't trust governments, any government, anywhere. I would ask the audience a question. Can anybody give me a single government leader anywhere in the world who they respect and think is doing a great job? Give me one. It's a serious question.
Jacinda.
I'm saying to you, in the times we live in, government is a challenge. So when it comes to standards and it comes to the points we were just talking about, I think we need to have a different attitude. And I think the attitude is one, in my opinion, of having an open environment. I think that we as individuals, as parents, as responsible people will find the good and we will eliminate the bad. And I think we're entitled in a democracy to make that decision for ourselves. We will make mistakes. I've made a statement already this evening that I don't trust Google. Google is a very successful business. I make another statement. 95% of education technologies are past their sell-by date and obsolete. They're applied in every school and every university, including this institute. They're all obsolete. They're all finished. And all they're trying to do is to come back with an AI strategy. I can relate a story, but maybe another time. But the point being, we have to take a different attitude. And again, the one other element I bring into place is that when you look at the education system, I think it is fundamentally flawed. Because historically, we've talked about the education ecosystem as being administration, building good schools, good colleges, universities. We've talked about empowering teachers to go and teach the students. And we've applied students who there's an expectation they're going to turn up at school, college, university and want to learn. Okay, that's an oxymoron alone. But the fact of the matter is we've forgotten something, and it's called the family. And basically, the generation we are today has basically allocated the responsibility of childhood to the school and to the teacher, which is unfair. Parents need to take some responsibility. To come back to the China point, and I know this firsthand, if you go to China and you meet Chinese families, every single parent I've met wants the best for their child. That is a Chinese philosophy, it's an Indian philosophy. I'm not convinced it's a UK philosophy. And if you start to adopt that philosophy within society, then the good actors will come to the top and the bad actors will fall away. I finished my rant.
Thank you. Ayca, you wanted to, and then I would like to get back to the family kind of environment, Joana, as well.
Mine will be less interesting, and I won't be. Yeah, I will go a little bit back to what you mentioned about innovation and regulation as a little bit like in opposition to each other. I completely disagree with this approach because I think we have a lot of evidence also when we look at age-appropriate design code in the UK, how it really did help because it took into account really specifically, in a really pragmatic, practical way about how this theoretical, really abstract laws apply in practice, working with designers, working with teachers, working with parents, children, and then brought this into a law, which is amazing, and it happened in the UK. And then there's a lot of evidence from companies saying that actually, you know what, this really helps. Now we understand what the law says, and that's really helpful because now we understand, for example, just one example from the law is fairness principle. Everyone thinks about it as bias, non-discrimination, whereas in the law it is about meeting expectations of data subjects, which are children. So it requires going to asking children, actually knowing your users better. So things like that. So I think that's just an example for me to share that the way we look at regulation and the way we talk about law is sometimes too abstract and different stakeholders don't talk to each other. And I think regulation, child rights-based approach, it's a must and it can really help companies as well. So I don't like seeing those as opposition to each other.
Great
we
point.
need law to, for better innovation as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
So just on the family,
Yeah.
although I have another point that I want to make.
Please.
On the family, of course, parents and teachers are stakeholders in this conversation as much as children are. And we have some people in the audience that are teachers that are learning from children and testing how children are impacted and how they use AI. So I think it's extremely important, and I think there's a huge responsibility from parents and children and anybody who's in charge of or in any way connected to raising healthy kids for the future to be part of that conversation. But the other thing I was thinking about when you guys were speaking is that if we think about other technologies that we have launched, maybe we didn't have these conversations, and maybe that's why there's such implications on children's well-being and humans' well-being from social media, for example. How great it is that we are able to have this conversation and to build something that, with positive intention in mind and actually have, legislation and corporate and academics sit together and children and build something that is fit for purpose, that we wouldn't have to ban in 5 years' time and, take devices off kids and so on.
I'm so pleased you said that. On your chairs, there's a brochure about the initiative, the Generation AI Initiative, which details some of these thoughts about not making the same mistakes we have with social media and not waiting 10 years to have the evidence. So can we think about better ways to more quickly generate evidence, translate that evidence into policies and new innovations, and inform a community that's more sort of rapid acting. So I'm going to go now to a lightning round, and then we're going to take some questions from this very patient audience. So very quick answers on the lightning round. So school phone bans. Question mark.
Sorry, the question is?
So school phone bans in schools.
I think it should be proportionate to the risk of
Proportionate to the risk, okay.
on the phone.
Yeah.
I agree. And also I would say very quickly, again, adults making decisions on behalf of children. And yeah, I think it's...
Never ends well.
Yeah, no.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
No to phones. Yeah.
Phones should be given to every student in every school. There's technology that can moderate and manage that in such a manner that it's 100% safe, 99.9% safe.
Okay.
I think it would be really nice to have times within school time to be blocked out for no phones so that people have the time and space to not be constantly monitoring whether your friends have texted you back and worried about it, but really sitting with your own thoughts, but then also learning how to use it as a tool. So block time.
Block time. Okay, good. Yeah.
I'd just like to see a better social media so we didn't have to ban phones.
Yep. All right. Are we in an AI bubble? Yeah?
I think that there definitely will be an AI bubble, but there were internet bubbles. We still have the internet as a fundamental infrastructure to our whole society. So,
no, this is fundamental. This changes society, changes the family, changes the way we learn. The point is, that we're talking about education, we're talking about children. I mean, I advocate education is from 3 to 83, and that's unfair to 2-year-olds and 84-year-olds. This is the world we live in today.
Yep. Okay. No, we're not in an AI bubble. Anybody want to say yes?
I want to say that we should look outside of the AI bubble and look at the implications and all the beautiful things that are happening outside of that as well. Maybe we can improve things within the AI bubble that way.
I think we're specifically in an AI agent bubble.
Okay. Favorite AI implementation?
Not fair.
Mine was that little Clippy art thing from Microsoft in 1995. Melinda Gates worked on that, by the way. That was her big project at Microsoft.
I've been indulging the Ghibli cartoons.
What's this?
The Ghibli, basically you can use...
Ghibli cartoons.
Yeah, Ghibli cartoons. You can
Okay,
change...
so you've been making your own anime.
Well, I've got a younger version of me, so I actually quite like that.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, that's fun.
I watched the presentation of a company that has created an AI future you.
Yeah.
So basically, you can ask who you might become, and it's kind of I guess, a choose-your-own-adventure type of thing. So if you want to if you take these steps, this is where you're going to end up.
Is this at the Media Lab? I heard about this from MIT Media Lab, where you create your own future you, and it actually shows
future you.
It's been proven to be effective at futures thinking and long-term perspective, and if you use that.
Yeah, and I think it opens an opportunity for you to dream bigger.
Yeah.
It allows you to see what you can achieve and what you can build.
You have another one?
Well, I have another one, but I think that one of the most fundamental uses of the AI we have today is to do with our own personal health. When you can't get a doctor's appointment, when you go to hospital and the processes are challenging at best, the ability to surface the most relevant information that's personal to you using authenticated AI capability is a complete game changer for every single person in this room.
I think it's unlocked my own understanding of my ability to create. Like, I never thought I would have a chance at knowing how to cultivate a garden of my own, and maybe through using Claude or something similar, I could actually figure out how to do that and manage it. So maybe the creations are yet to come. Cool.
So we have a pretty rudimentary. Oh, sorry.
No, please,
no.
Please,
you go. Well, okay. Quickly, people who know Springwatch, we have an AI that helps figure out whether or not a badger is doing anything, and I feel like as an animal lover, that is a great application.
Yes.
Springwatch.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you about it after.
Now we want to know.
We were talking about the shipping forecast earlier. So good. Yeah, I feel last.
I think I will go quickly to a similar example that I gave earlier about creativity and how actually children with disabilities are using it in ways, well, basically AI making things that are not really possible in traditional classroom. And that is in the context of more art and creativity that I've seen quite impactful.
100% endorsed.
Yeah, great, cool. We'll take some questions now from. So microphones are right here. So we'll start here on the corner and then work our way back that way.
Yeah, I would love to see.
Thank you. Given this is shaping AI for the next generation.
Yep. Yeah, maybe introduce yourself.
Richard Alberg, and I chair the largest technology platform in the country for the apprenticeship sector. Given that AI is affecting just about every industrial area and type of work, and is getting more and more prevalent, and we know what we're on the cusp of, do you see the next generation as being one that will have full employment? Or do you think life will look quite different for the next generation?
I think you work and live in a very interesting place. I think that, from my point of view, the transition from academic rigor to competency in the workforce, not just from an apprenticeship point of view, but also from lifelong learning and continual professional development, I think it's one of the key opportunities of changing society. So I think AI is going to play a huge role in that particular capability. Universities, at best, you leave with a degree and you leave with an email address so they can send you emails and ask for money. They should be actually helping you continue your lifelong learning professional development through the apprenticeships into employment, into empowerment, and also, may I suggest, the reverse model of where you bring the experience from the people that have gone into enterprise, into business, back into the universities to mentor and to support the next generation. Well, I think jobs are going to change. I mean, I'm an optimist, but again, I also said I'm pretty stupid. I actually think there's just going to be different jobs. So the fear factors are nonsense. They are problems to be solved, and solving those problems, but a more intelligent community with aspirations and goals. I mean, we were talking about entrepreneurship. Someone I was talking to earlier said, my son wants to be an entrepreneur. How exciting. So we need to build entrepreneurs, need to build businesses, need to build opportunities.
I think something that's also really important in this conversation is, it's not AI that takes the jobs, it's CEOs that make decisions around where those jobs go, So I think, I also am an optimist in the sense that I think there will be new jobs, I think there's going to be new opportunities, but I think we have to be kind of quite clear about who actually is making those decisions and the type of decisions they're making, and whether it's upskilling a workforce or making a choice at the organizational level to pursue new avenues to preserve the work of so many people. So I think that's an important distinction.
You're seeing it right now in the software development sector, where Facebook has 25% fewer software engineers than they had 3 years ago, and the junior engineers are becoming basically obsolete. It's the senior engineers that can be are 4 times as effective. So
yeah, but you need to ask yourself the question: are those people leaving to build their own businesses,
they're all good
or are
reasons,
they being thrown out of the company because they're not needed? I'm not sure which side it falls down.
Yeah, don't know.
I think in the creative industry, sorry, I'll stop talking, but in the creative industries,
you're on the panel.
This is also really creates a really interesting tension, right? Because for a lot of creatives, the work that they did to be able to be an actor or an artist is the kind of work that is now, in theory, being cannibalized by, AI. So copyright, some of these basic writing reports or whatever. So you sort of see these unintended consequences as well around what that means for creatives if it's only going to be a certain sector of society that can actually afford to do that kind of work. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think there are going to be these really interesting sort of shifts that we'll see as well.
Next question. Let's go to that side here. We'll switch back and forth.
Hello, my name's Paul McCrory. I was invited along by Rakesh. But I've got a particular interest in explainable AI and its use potentially in relation to regulation. Basically, my question is, because there was very little discussion of it, to what extent does the panel have concerns regarding the trustworthiness of AI, the explainability of it, and also do any of the panel think that children should have dedicated models developed for them, given the risks attached to a lot of the internet scraping and everything else that's been sort of pushed in. Like, it seems that the models are potentially polluted with an awful lot of quite dangerous material in some cases.
I'm curious to hear your reaction to that. I think this is the point about things like the design code,
AI code, yes,
and other kinds of guardrail approaches to.
Exactly, it is. So the question is whether it's trustworthy, or is it what's out there? Is it good enough? Is that I know you asked an amazing question, long question, but do you want me to answer to that bit? Was that the first bit? I think definitely it starts with identifying these risks and harms, like potential harm first. So identification, evaluation, how do we address those? And exactly as in the AI code, which like there's a way to do that, and we need to be discussing these things, and without addressing the harms and risks, and without we also discussing the benefits and balancing those, and having a rights-based approach on how do we address these things. Of course, children should not be using, it depends on the context and the thing, and exactly, I think, going back to what you were saying, is that this is a very contextual matter. It depends on the age groups, it depends on different children, and what risks that we are talking about at hand. And for me, the only way forward is really to having this AI code and rights-based approach, and how do we evaluate these risks, and how do we address those.
It just so happens that that's sitting behind this gentleman is somebody who might know something about this area. Or Katja, do you want to? Katja Hertog from the who's an ethicist that studies.
Well, I'm a sociologist, but I do work at the Institute for Ethics and AI. I had a question, though.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to jump in and answer that.
No, I didn't have the comment.
Well, maybe
I had the
Peter knows,
question.
next to you. So, yeah. Should you trust the big models?
The current ones?
Yeah.
No.
No. Oh, yeah, by the way, that is a no for me as well. I
think
I was not clear
Ayca,
enough.
in a very polite way, said no.
No, but Andrew, this is a key point, because there seems to be a misunderstanding. Should we trust the big models? The answer to that is no. They have a use. And again, it comes back to asking the right question, interpreting the answer. If you can do that, then they're useful. But I come back to what I said a little earlier in the conversation. You have now built-for-purpose AI technology being developed. That is where the trust coefficient will be delivered, and then you as a consumer can make a decision, is that fit for you, is it right for you, and the guardrails will be embedded within those environments.
So like locally running models on your
but can
data.
I also point out, I mean, this is something I get asked a lot. I mean, I've been in this sector now for the better part of 20 years, and people say, where are we with education technology? We're still at the starting point. We're not even at the middle, never mind about the end. Is that the iteration. I mean, to quote an Apple example, I've got an Apple 16 Pro in my pocket. The Apple 17 is already built, sitting in a cupboard, waiting to be sold in a year's time. The innovation, the iteration is already out there. It's already developing. So we need to be agile in terms of how we adopt these technologies and work with it and see it evolve over time.
Katja, go to your question now. Yeah.
In some way maybe relates to some of the issues, but in particular, I was very interested in the discussion about the role of families that you had towards the end of it, and some of the panelists were talking about the importance of bringing families back in and how the schools are less important. I'm a sociologist who is very interested in inequalities, and one of my immediate questions is, well, families are very different. Not all families are the same, not in the sort of, on the extreme end, not everybody has families, not all families are benevolent, but even sort of if we don't look at that, not all parents are equally have equal levels of media literacy, are equally able to support their children in this world. We have some influence over schools. We can have education programs there and mandate that. We do not have the same thing about families. And if we get companies develop technologies to rely on parents stepping in, that is going to lead to huge levels of inequality in outcomes. And I was just wondering, what do you think about that, and how would you respond to that?
No, but you make a really good point. And again, I would argue this, is that the academic piece of education is pretty well covered. There are very competent academics and teachers teaching good stuff. I think the movement is working towards what is referred to as social and emotional learning. Grit, perseverance, mastery is the skills which we respectfully, as parents, should be embedding in our children. So the pastoral care, the qualities that we need to teach the next generation. I personally get extremely irritated walking down the street when I have people bumping into me because they've got their faces stuck in their iPhones. I mean, the etiquette, politeness, respect is not taught. And I think AI can play a really, really important part in helping form society and bringing some of those qualities back into the ecosystem.
No, you
Joana?
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say something. I agree with you, and I appreciate the fact that everybody has a different constellation. But I think it's important to involve the whole ecosystem, irrespective of what it looks like. On one hand, because we need to build trust. Obviously, we need to safeguard children, but we need to build trust in their guardians who would potentially limit or allow a certain amount of use of that technology. And then on the other hand, it's also these older people like us that need to learn certain things and get educated as well. So from both ends, I think it's important to engage the whole ecosystem in the conversation.
But clearly there's a role for, adult children relationships, whether that's a coach, whether that's a teacher, whether that's a neighbor, whether that's a parent, and can only needs one of those to be incredibly protective and beneficial.
Exactly, but you know what? One more thing that I'd like to add is we still don't know enough about the implications on children's well-being, and that's why I think it's really important to understand, how current ways of using this technology impacts their cognitive development, their social skills, their emotional regulation skills. So once we know, and that's why we need to do this research, and hopefully we'll have something to share, but once we know, then we're able to have an action plan and address that.
Can I very,
maybe Antonia first then.
Very quickly add to that, I couldn't agree more. There is a huge lack of evidence in research, especially like how, we are talking about how actually AI use, data use impacts children. We are currently at the Digital Futures for Children's Center looking at different AI EdTech tools and how they impact children's rights. And the lack of evidence out there about especially the well-being aspects or like different rights is huge, both about benefits and the risks we have evidence, but also so there is need for more research. For me as an academic, it's, you always say that.
But is that purely to do with AI or is it to do with gaming as well?
Exactly, yeah, that's another great, very important sector. And also the gaming sector, different sectors, health sectors integrated into EdTech. So it thinks the education sector. So that's an interesting one as well. But anyways, I'm not going to talk more, but an excellent point. And I just wanted to,
Did you want to mention something, Antonia?
Yeah, I think you raised something really important that's sort of adjacent to the conversation, which is around equality and equality of access in general. We at the BBC, we think about if we can broadcast our content to, the Orkney Islands as well as we can in London, right? And so even just from a digital equality perspective, not all places, certainly in the UK, let alone globally, are created equal. And I think one of the interesting things we saw during the COVID pandemic is, how the attempts to get information, particularly to non-English speaking communities within the UK, and it's relatively easy to translate, information into some different languages, but depending on where you are, or who you are, or what language you speak, it becomes increasingly more and more expensive. So that's sort of a micro example, but I think speaks to this sort of macro problem around equality and access to information. And I would say this because I'm representing a public service broadcaster, but the importance of funding public services that will go that extra mile to translate something into a very niche language that a commercial entity just wouldn't bother with because it's not worth it to them.
Okay. Next question over here. You've been waiting, yeah. And then we'll go back.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question in two parts.
And who are you, sir?
Yes, I was leading to that.
Okay.
My name is Renato Goodfellow, and I spent 44 years in the communications world, so now is the time to give something back to the world. So last December, I launched a charity I'm CEO of in the House of Lords, which is GCEL Network, Global Sustainable Education and Leadership. And my simple way of putting it, helping the next generation to have the right values, the right understanding to sort out the legacy, which is the mess we're going to hand over to them. But what I'd like to ask in exercises I've gone through some years ago with IBM and other computers, the biggest concern raised of all is what is AI doing to the plasticity of the child's brain as they're learning, how it's changing that learning process. And a simple example, going back to the iPhone and people looking at the phone to see where they're going, is London cab drivers. It was said for many years they have a massive hippocampus for their sense of navigation. And now they say with smartphones, the hippocampus has shrunk in most people's brains. The brain is being repurposed. So my concern is what is the ease of access to information and it being presented in certain ways, doing to that evolving early stage of the child's brain that could be doing collateral damage for the future. I'd like to see what the panel think of that. And the second part to address afterwards is I think we're guilty of something we've done for generations, and that is with children present, we talk about what children think, what's happening to them. So could we also ask the youngest person I can see in the room what they think of what we've been talking about? Thank you.
If he's comfortable with that.
So this was covered in Jonathan Haidt's book, Anxious Generation. It's all called The Great Rewiring. Is there evidence of the Great Rewiring happening? Does anybody have a view on that?
I can remember coming home one evening from work and walking into the house and seeing my son in front of the TV with his Game Boy computer, something else as well. He was doing 5 things at the same time. And we were paying for his private education, which was costing me lots of tax money. And I remember looking at my wife and sort of saying to her, like, well, the language perhaps I shouldn't repeat here, but what the hell's going on? He went to Cambridge, got a double first, went to Oxford, got a master with distinction. He's now a barrister earning more money than I can even imagine. So I'm not worried about elasticity. I just want to be able to give young people the opportunity to be the best version of themselves. And that's something I strongly advocate. It's not a case of educating to an exam level or passing a test. It's for each individual to be able to fulfill their own potential. Some are late learners, some are early learners, some are adopters. We need to be able to facilitate each individual on a personal learning journey and a personal learning outcome. I believe that AI empowers that ecosystem probably better than any technology I've come across previously.
I think
Socrates had a concern over this, which we would outsource memory to this written form because he was, of a sort of from a culture where sort of remembering your stories was the most important thing about it. So we've been worried about this for a long time. I don't believe there's any evidence of any kind of long-term neurological differences in children, although there may be evidence that emerges. Sorry.
Just add one angle of this. I do think we need to be in problem-solving mode with, going back to the trustworthiness question, is how do we know what we know? How do we know that what we think we know is true? Yep. And this is a huge open question in especially the form of younger forms of education. And I think that is one of those areas that there are not good answers for how these tools are going to be presented to them and framed. And how do we teach kids how to go on fact-finding missions if their default is inherently this amazing tool that is not verified? You can't trace its chain of thought.
Yeah, and I guess I'm more interested in understanding where there are biomarkers of productive engagement versus risk, biomarkers that signify risk in some ways, and how the system and parents and teachers can identify where there's development that's happening effectively and where development's happening in a yeah.
I think the gentleman in the blue t-shirt has been really
yes,
patient.
That's right. Yes. Everyone's been.
No, thank you very much. Tim Edwards, I'm building the Duolingo of recruitment. Going back to the mobile phone bans in schools, very young children love to learn, but the education system often takes a lot of the joy out of that. So, yes, we want to look at discouraging mobile phone use during school time, but how can we reimagine the education system so that children don't want to spend all their time on their phones?
There's some teachers in the audience that I'd love to get the answers to. Answer to that question. Does any teacher in the audience? I bet Katie knows the answer to that. Introduce yourself, Katie.
Hi, Katie. Super lovely to be here. I work at Wellington. So absolutely agree. Children are so naturally curious. So I think the key is to make it super, super relevant to them, what's happening in the world. Make it really fun, make it active, get them outside, make sure they're connecting. So all the things that promote flourishing, bring them into the classroom, them into the school day. And then hopefully, through that joy, they'll be able to disconnect from their phones and connect with human beings.
Other thoughts about that question? Anybody? You agree? Yeah?
Can I just add that I think it's a case of teaching people how to use a phone? I mean, it's actually education. The point is, it's a tool. A car is a tool. But you wouldn't drive a car for 24 hours, 7 days a week. It's just not practical. You get tired. So I think we need to educate the next generation to respect and understand what these tools are and how to use them.
There's this interesting idea in the Netherlands, the idea of having a license for a phone. So just the same way you sort of get a driving license to, that proves that you have the certain sort of knowledge of the capabilities and risks associated with it before you get access to that.
Can I add something as well to that? How about we let this also be children-led? There was a NASA study that actually identified that kids below the age of 5 years old, 95% of them are creative geniuses. And as they grow older, we lose that. So maybe, again, we should listen to the needs and have a more, with AI actually, it could be a lot more personalized and individual way of treating specific qualities.
We're going to have two more questions.
Hi, so I'll just add to this question, and that will also lead to my question. My name is Aruj Khalik. I'm an educationist, and I'm also the National AI Advisor to Pakistan's Ministry for Planning and Sustainable Development. I'm also a student here. I'm currently specializing in social intervention and policy evaluation. First would be my reflection on what we were discussing on how to engage kids outside of cell phones. So there's a framework called Meaningful Learning with Technology that talks about learning being intentional. It talks about learning being collaborative, active, intentional. So I really urge people to read up on that if that's one thing you're interested in. That also leads to my question, which is that there are two things. There's learning from technology, which is like being passive users of technology, that you're putting in some ideas in an AI or any technology for that matter, and you're generating outputs that in that particular scenario, you are dependent on the technology, right? My question to you as experts and AI enthusiasts is that what are some competencies that you see are essential for learning with AI as opposed to learning from AI? And specifically in the context of education. This is particularly one big question that we're thinking of at the ministry, because currently we're devising Pakistan's first curriculum for AI interventions in schools. And this is one question we have been grappling about again and again, that how do we make the move from learning from AI to learning with AI?
I think you had some good points about these skills earlier.
I'm happy to go with that one. I mean, look, it's about driving a relevance engine. It's about driving the inspiration that the lady at the back just referred to. It's about inspiring. I'm sure many of the people in the room would have a teacher that they remember from their childhood. That teacher was inspiring for whatever reason it was inspiring. We need to look on technology as that catalyst, to be that inspiration. So the point is, it's a case of, I think what's fundamentally wrong is curriculum and structure. I mean, in business, there's a reference to what's called an 80-20 rule, where 80% of your time is spent on the core competency of the company, the technology, whatever it is, and 20% is about innovation and disruption and changing things. Why can we not have an 80-20 rule in education? Why can we not have a class for inspiration? Why can't we let children go off on their journey, whether it's painting a picture or using an AI? We are missing the huge opportunities that are here to use technology for the good. But the technology is a tool. The technology is not the solution. It is purely a tool to help facilitate that personal learning journey, that personal learning outcome.
So I think key to this is choice, actually. So so agency and choice in interfacing with these incredibly powerful systems where, curiosity, skepticism, creativity, and choice would be the skills that I think I would want to do. We'll take one more question. In the front row here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam Dukes-Adams. I'm Chair of Governors for King Alfred School, which is a rational and progressive school. So a lot of what you're talking about, Alan, and my question is for the two of you, Ayca and Alan.
I'm a big fan of your school.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, we've got other governors dotted through the group here. I think my core question really, because obviously we are a thinking school, we're a thoughtful school, we're contemplating. That might not be quick enough. I think one of the things I hear us talk about is, with every gain there's a loss, with every loss there's a gain. It feels like the gains are so quick, we're not quite sure what we're losing, therefore we're not sure what we're also gaining. And I worry a bit about that and the time for thought. But I think my kind of specific question really is, at what point and how would you integrate AI into the education system pipeline? Because you're talking in a pipeline way.
No, but we need to put context here. Your school is 25 or 30 years ahead of its time. I mean, it is a remarkable institution. It's got criticised for many, many different reasons. Yeah. And all of a sudden, society's waking up and realising, actually, that's really a clever way of teaching.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan. So I don't think I can answer your question. I think you can answer your question.
Well, that's brilliant.
How would you answer the
I
question?
would agree.
Well, I mean, we're child-centered. We put the child at the forefront of it. We are informed by Bowlby and Winnicott, and we're probably going to lean in more into Beyond's thinking and really thinking about some of the sort of sociological aspects of the family dynamic and thinking about the homeschool agreement.
But you do something which other schools don't do.
Well, we let them play and get dirty.
Thank you very much.
And
but that is the magic, okay? Your school has had play at the center of its philosophy since day one, and other schools are closing down their sports grounds, closing down their gymnasiums, closing down their exercise. It is completely dysfunctional.
And we won't. I think the other thing too is that we allow them to learn at their own rate. So we take the 4 to 18
100%.
journey, and we allow that journey to occur in
Can
the
I
way
be
that it
your
needs to
friend?
occur. Yes.
So I think
I'll co-opt you.
on Facebook, friends on Facebook.
Let's not do that.
No, but seriously, this is really important because, come to the other challenge of the neurodivergent children. I'm working on a project, or beginning on a project, with the Geisha School in North London that you may not be familiar with. And Ali Durbin, who built the Geisha School, has taken 8 years, has built the most remarkable school. 3 teachers and helpers to every child. The kids are just extraordinary. I went there. It's one of the most emotional experiences I had for years, and I've had several. But what's really interesting about it, and she won't mind me telling you, is that she's written a journal. She's written a book, How to Teach Teachers How to Teach Neurodivergent Children. She's got a map sitting on the wall that is a map of how this does. And I said, what's this for? She said, well, it's for the teachers in the school and for the parents. And I said, well, why doesn't everybody in the world know about this?
Yeah.
And if she will permit me, I've got a meeting next Thursday with one of her trustees and some potential family officers who may back this. I want to take her journal, nothing to do with me, and apply an AI to that and actually take that on a global basis. I offer you the same opportunity. I think what you do fundamentally, how many kids do you have in your school? 200?
No, 700.
700, wow, it's grown, okay.
Yeah.
But my point is, shouldn't 700 be 7,000 or 70,000 or 700,000?
Yeah.
And in every country in the world.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. We'd love to influence
Big
the
fan.
system.
So I invite you all now to give the panel a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And importantly, we're going to be serving drinks to continue the discussion with some nibbles in the college bar. So thank you all for coming. This has been a really inspirational event. There's so much we can learn from those in the audience. And thank you to Rakesh and the Codex team for helping us put this together.
Thank you, Andrew. I just want to also thank the panel. I think we've had a fantastic and interesting discussion, which will no doubt continue in the bar downstairs over drinks and something to eat. But let's give the panel an expert moderation from Andrew. Let's give them all a fantastic round of applause.
Thank you.
Also, a big thank you to Reuben College for hosting this event. I think it's been a real honour to be here at Oxford University, the pinnacle of the English education system, to discuss this extremely important subject.
And importantly, Anthony Bridgen, who's standing back there. So thank you, Anthony, for all of your help tonight.
Yeah. I too would like to thank Anthony as well, because we've liaised quite extensively on this event, and you've been a fantastic help in organising this event. So let's give Anthony a fantastic round of applause.
Thank you. Yeah.
And finally, I just want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming, and please do enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.